On this edition of Have Grave Will Travel, Adam and I are in the state of New York to meet with fellow Pro Football Researchers Association members, interview author Jeff Miller, and visit the graves of two individuals who both have ties to the Carlisle Indian School, Pop Warner and Isaac Seneca. It was a cold and rainy morning when we left Michigan and began our 6-hour drive to the state of New York. We went through Indiana and Ohio, stopping in Cleveland for lunch, which was about the halfway point in our journey. I like to stop at this one particular Quaker Steak and Lube restaurant whenever I'm in the Cleveland area for a couple of reasons. They have great food and a great atmosphere, but more importantly, they have my all-time favorite car mounted on the wall. That's right. I said mounted on the wall. A 1978 Indianapolis Pace Car Edition Chevy Corvette. After lunch, we were back on the road, through Pennsylvania, along Lake Erie, and finally into New York. The GPS had us traveling on Route 438 through the Seneca Nation. It was then that I realized we were soon to be going right past the cemetery where Isaac Seneca is buried. This was not a planned stop on our trip, but serendipity and GPS directions brought us right to the cemetery's entrance. It is a small cemetery, and we found the grave rather quickly. Time to pay our respects. Today we're in the United Missions Cemetery in New York, and we're here to see the grave of Isaac Seneca, who is an All-American at the Carlisle Indian School. Isaac Seneca grew up on the reservation where he is buried. He was sent to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in 1892, where he learned to be a blacksmith. He also played on the football team, and he was very good at it. In 1899, he was named to Walter Camp's All-American team, the first ever player from Carlisle. The cemetery is located off of Route 438, and it has 3 entrances. Take the middle entrance into the cemetery. It's not paved or anything, it's just a couple of ruts, and it could be pretty muddy like it is today. But right as you come up the first hill, past a big tree, you'll see his marker right here on your right-hand side. Thank you, Isaac Seneca, for making the world of football a better place. Isaac Seneca's time at Carlisle would cross paths with legendary college football coach Pop Warner, but we'll have more on that in a bit. After our cemetery visit, we made the short drive to Springville and checked into our hotel. Later that evening, we met up with several PFRA members at the Steel-Bound Brewery for some great food and lots of football talk. The next day, we drove around Springville to check out the grave of Pop Warner, which is right on Main Street. Today we're in the Maplewood Cemetery here in Springville, New York, and we're here to visit the grave of Glenn Pop Warner, a true innovator in the world of college football. Glenn Warner played college football at Cornell. He was a few years older than the other players on the team, so they gave him the nickname Pop. He went on to be a college football head coach for over 40 years and won more than 300 games during his career. He coached at Iowa State, Georgia, Cornell, Pittsburgh, Temple, Stanford, and of course, the Carlisle Indian School. There, he coached the one and only Jim Thorpe in football, baseball, basketball, and track and field. Warner was also a great innovator in football, from improving player safety equipment and creating the blocking sled and the tackling dummy. He also created the single and double wing formations and the controversial hidden ball play, which was used only once and banned the following year. Warner was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1951. But Springville is not just the home of his final resting place. We also went to the local high school football field, which is named after Warner. And later that day, we visited a local museum that has 2 rooms dedicated to Warner, who grew up in Springville. Next, we're going to talk to a man who literally wrote the book on Pop Warner, Jeff Miller, who actually lives right here in Springville, New York. So, Jeff, you've lived here in Springville, New York for how many years?
30 years now.
30 years. So you're well acquainted with Pop Warner and his
Mm,
legacy to the community as well as the football world.
absolutely. It's something you know and learn as soon as you move into town.
The high school football field is named after him,
Right.
and there's a museum here in
Yes,
town.
sir.
And so, what was the impetus for you writing this book?
Well, I had just written a book with Marv Levy, and my third grade teacher happened to be in the audience when I was doing a presentation. And she came up to me and she said, no one's ever written a book about Pop Warner. And, he comes from Springville, wink, wink, hint, hint. And so I said, I kind of put it on the back burner because wasn't, I thought I was a professional football writer. But the more I thought about it, I figured, well, I'm probably the only one in Springville who's an actual football writer. And, the more I studied on Pop, the more I realized there's a lot there and his story needed to be told. So I just figured I'm a natural one to do it.
So the museum here in town, was that a big help in helping you research Pop Warner?
Yeah, they had a lot of books there. They also had a lot of photographs. But seriously, there wasn't a lot of information on Pop here because most of his career was spent abroad.
Right.
He coached at Stanford, he coached in Pittsburgh, Carlisle. So he didn't really spend a lot of time in Springville. He maintained a home here until his later in age, but there wasn't really a lot. So I had to go to the colleges where he coached to get a lot of the information. So I had to go to Pittsburgh to get information on that, or I have a friend who's out in California who got me some stuff out of Stanford, etc.
How long did it take you to research the book before?
This was a 4-year project.
4 years.
It was a long time. It was longer than I expected, and I had to get a couple of deadline extensions from my publisher because it just took a lot longer than I thought it would. Because again, I thought everything would be right here in Springville, and it wasn't.
Mm. So, in all your research, what do you think is Pop Warner's most significant achievement to the world of football?
I would have to say that coaching Jim Thorpe and making him the All-American athlete that he was, and allowed him to go on to greater fame. He became obviously the gold medal winner in the decathlon and the pentathlon in the Summer Olympics of 1912, and he also had a major league baseball career before he became a professional football player. So he was truly the greatest athlete that ever lived, and I think Pop Warner gave him that opportunity.
Would Pop Warner be as big today without Jim Thorpe?
Probably not. He would still be a famous coach, but Jim Thorpe and Pop Warner kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do. I mean, when you mention one, you almost have to mention the other.
And his Warner's successes at Carlisle were Thorpe's, and vice versa. Pop Warner had All Americans at Carlisle before Thorpe came along, but he didn't have Jim Thorpe. And Jim Thorpe transcended all sports at that time. So he really made Warner's legend, I would say.
And the entire community has embraced the legacy of Pop Warner in the community. Uh, you get to see that firsthand.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen another community that has ever honored a native son like that, the way that this town has done for Pop Warner?
Well, I'm sure some have, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I'm sure if you go out west or something, you'll find something about Newt Rockney or whatever. But there aren't too many famous people that have come out of Springville, and Pop Warner's huge. He's one of the winningest coaches in NCAA history. He's got national championships. He's got All Americans who are tied to his name, not just Jim Thorpe, Joe Guyon, Isaac Seneca, Ernie Nevers, and other players he's coached along the way have been All Americans and have gone on to great careers.
What is the population of Springville? How small is it?
It's about 2,500 people.
2,500 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very small.
All right, Jeff. Thanks for talking to us today.
My pleasure.
I really
Andy.
appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
Your book was great. I read it many years ago, and it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it for anybody. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
You can find Jeff's book, Pop Warner: A Life on the Gridiron, on Amazon or wherever fine football books are sold. He also has several other football books you might be interested in reading. Join us again next time as we travel the country, searching for the final resting places of the famous and not so famous icons of the gridiron. You can also read articles on my other gridiron grave visits on our website, theworldoffootball.com, under my articles. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.